Hello again, and thanks for tuning in. If you were kind enough to watch the pilot episode of Back to the Newsies, I really appreciate you joining me again for another exploration of retro games magazines. If not, as soon as you're done here, go back and watch that episode where I cover GB Action Magazine issue 6. Club Nintendo was a bi-monthly subscription-based magazine arranged by Catalyst Publishing and given to anyone who had bought a NES and completed the inbox form. Now, I say magazine, but it's more of a glorified advert for Nintendo's NES and Game Boy software catalogue. There are no adverts, no review scores, but then again, every game on the NES and Game Boy is great, right? So just assume that everything got 5 invincibility stars. The magazine was translated into several other languages and published all over Europe. As a means of maintaining the artifice of being an actual magazine, Club Nintendo does feature previews, labelled here as sneak peeks, tips and tricks, and a letters page. During its lifetime, it covered the well-established NES, the recently released Game Boy, and the birth of the Super Nintendo. So, slip on a global hypercolour t-shirt, crack open a bottle of Panda Pop, and prepare yourself for some totally radical Nintendo news. Nintendo in 1991 was at their absolute peak. The SNES had just come out in the States, the NES had single-handedly revived the deceased US video game market, selling 30 plus million units in the process, 13 million Famicoms sold in Japan. There was competition in the States from Sega as the Mega Drive and not Genesis chipped away at Nintendo's lead. In the UK and Europe, the home micros were still doing pretty well, but Nintendo Mania was assuredly taking over. The Game Boy had come out 2 years prior and was doing incredibly well, and there was huge hype for the European SNES launch. This here is issue 5 of volume 3. Seeing as these issues were subscription only, they weren't limited to a monthly schedule. Hence it's tricky to know exactly when the magazine came out. I mean, we know it was in 1991, it was before Mario 3, as there's only a sneak peek of Mario's greatest 8-bit outing. The cover game, Ninja Gaiden, none of that Shadow Warriors nonsense, apparently came out at the very end of December, missing the Christmas rush. For a bit of online sleuthing fun, let's try to frame the publication date of this issue from clues littered throughout the text. Get your dear stalkers ready, kiddies, we're going to Sherlock the shit out of this one. So, starting with the cover, we have a lovely cropped look at the box art for Shadow Warriors / Ninja Gaiden. Like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles before it, Ninja Gaiden was subject to bizarre censorship in the UK that saw the term ninja replaced with anything else. Inexplicably, ninja was deemed to be immoral and would lead British kiddies to commit atrocities. Last thing parents wanted was for little Timmy to start running across rooftops hosting shurikens at the neighbourhood cats. On a related note, there was some weird censorship in 3D Realms' Shadow Warrior on the PC. In that game, the basic weapon is a shuriken, but to appease censors, the shuriken were replaced with darts. Just common or garden darts. Now, shuriken are not readily available in the UK, but darts are. So little Timmy could have easily grabbed a handful of darts and gone on a rampage down his local C&A, all thanks to bored, hand-wringing middle-aged women. Good job, Mary. It wasn't just the UK that was subject to bonkers censorship. Other European countries used the inoffensive title as well. As a main title, Ninja Gaiden was unacceptable, but as a subheading, it's all good, baby. Looks like they used the French box art for this. It's really weirdly cropped. The Nintendo logo is cut through its top third. The Tecmo logo loses its bottom third. The original seal of quality appears mostly unscathed. It's also fantastically gloomy. The box art scan is too dark and stands in deep contrast with the white border. Here's what the cover would have looked like with the full original image. There was another completely different box art for some parts of Europe that featured a kind-faced young man who was definitely not a ninja because you can see his face. Elsewhere on the cover, we are promised 6 other tremendous titles. Playing it coy there, especially when you see what the tremendous titles are. There's a sneak peek of Super Mario 3, and tips and tricks for Rad Gravity. Generally, the tips and tricks sections were pretty good. In time, Club Nintendo would release special issues of the magazine made up entirely of these sections as a retrospective or compilation. Plus 19 great new Game Boy games featured. The Game Boy didn't arrive until 1990 in the UK, meaning the first 5 issues of Club Nintendo were NES-only affairs. I'd estimate the Game Boy had had a solid year on the shelves by the time this magazine landed on subscribers' doormats, so there should be some pretty rocking titles by now. Isn't it delightful to see 80s era Mario? I love that design. There were a few redesigns on the way to the standardised Mario graphic we have today, but Mario 3 era look, that oddly shaped, manic expression, red dungarees, Mario's clothes would swap over for Mario 3 with red shirt and blue dungarees. I remember knockoff Mario goods that had horrendous acid yellow colouring for his face, and of course hilariously adapted images to make it appear that the mushrooms Mario was collecting were indeed super. Okay, on to page 1. It's a list of all NES and Game Boy games available at the time of going to press. You'd think after having 4 years on UK shelves there'd be a few more games in this, right? Let's count. Almost 80 games and 10 on the way. What games have you got? Print a lovely copy from the scan I made. Link in description below. Here's mine circa 1991 for your records. Now, back to estimating release date for this issue. Low G-Man, a game I adore, came out at the beginning of September. Okay. Power Blade, another game I had in my collection that I also love, came out in January of 92. And Battle of Olympus, which is featured in this list as being currently available, came out at the end of September. Super Mario Bros. 3 was end of August. Well, that's something to go on at least, even if the dates don't quite line up. By programmable series Excite Bugs, did I mean the track editor? It looks a bit lonely there on its own. In time it will be joined by Wrecking Crew and Mac Rider. Fun fact, these level editors were all largely useless as there was no means to save your creation to the NES pack. In Japan, however, where the Famicom disk system was a thing, players could back up their tracks and levels to these discs for future play sessions. It is possible that there were still hooks in these games which would have checked to see if a PAL or NTSC equivalent of the Famicom disk system was attached, and, if it was, make the save option available. Just look at that list of Game Boy games though, jeez Louise, there are some absolute stonkers on there. UK launch titles Alleyway, Tetris and Super Mario Land, awesome arcade conversions of Chase HQ, Double Dragon and R-Type, franchise tie-ins from Turtles, Batman, DuckTales, and who could forget, the Chess Master. Yes, it's chess! Wherever and whenever you want! Truly, it's the age of miracles. Right. Pick your top 3, don't think about it, just blast your picks in the comments section. Don't be shy with lists like this, there are no wrong answers. Probably. The list of upcoming games is also pant-wettingly good. Low G-Man, Power Blade, Simpsons, Super Mario Bros. 3, Castlevania for the Game Boy. Castlevania for the Game Boy would have got a lot of people really excited back in the day. It's too bad that Castlevania The Adventure was a little bit plops. Super RC Pro-Am was lit though. Hang on a tick, the games listed as coming soon are all reviewed in the next issue. Well, not Defender of the Crown for some reason. Seems that release dates and magazine coverage are different things entirely, so we cannot rely on their chronology at all. Pants. If you had any doubt as to whether these games were indeed in the stores, you could always confirm by writing to or calling the Nintendo hotline, I guess. The exact nature of the supplied address and phone number is unclear. I wonder what's at PO Box 104 Fareham, Hants, PO 168 you are nowadays. A quick look. Nando's. Of course it is. Try asking them how to find the 5th Triforce piece in Legend of Zelda and see how you get on. Alright, over the page is a message from the big man himself, Mario. He lists the upcoming games in the run-up to Christmas. Next issue of Club Nintendo was the Christmas 91 edition. And goes great lengths to promote Super Mario Bros. 3, as they should, as it's one of the NES's very best games. In describing the cover game, he praises Ninja Gaiden's cinema-style graphics and exciting gameplay. He's not wrong, but more on that later.
There's literally plenty for every style of player.
Is an incredible sentence and one I hope to use at least daily. It's up there with, there are absolutely some games for every style of player, and it's confirmably sufficient for every style of player.
Quite absorbing!
Man alive, they can't even lie about how interesting Boulder Dash is. I love this. Is it being intentionally subversive?
Join us next issue for the surprisingly non-cancer causing Goonies 2 on the NES.
That last sentence reads like they've had some complaints about featuring platforming and adventure games too much, and they're trying to address the balance a bit. Fair play to them, but put sports games in the bin. According to a great interview on Nintendo Life, there's a link in the description, the Club Nintendo staff had no choice in the games covered. The Big N chose the games they wanted featured, nor did they even write the reviews. The reviews were done by some nameless freelancer who also took the screenshots, leading some pretty naff cropped images appearing in the magazine. Mario also promises a smorgasbord of games for the gentle Game Boy enthusiast, highlighting the 4-player F1 race and the
quite superb
R-Type. as featured in the previous video of Back to the Newsies. Mario loses points for trying to sneak in the word vacation. This would not have flown in 1991's UK. I wonder if this text was also supplied by Nintendo. And there's the classic Mario-Luigi rivalry. This time Mario is bullying the green bean for playing too much Tetris and not sorting the mailbag. There's a weird 2000 AD Tharg vibe to this bit, with the Overlord editor picking at his hard-working subjects. The contents page does promise a lot, all packed into a slim 32-page brochure of glossy delights. Unfortunately, the first review is for a sports game, but don't worry, once that spaff's out the way, there are some pretty darn good games for us to chat about. Jellicoe brings us goal! Jellicoe, previously Japan Leisure Company, were pretty prolific in the NES days. They published City Connection, the inferior version of Choplifter, Maniac Mansion, A Boy and His Blob, a port of the C64 classic Last Ninja, and the phenomenal Shadowhand. Dear Lord, the reviewer lays it on pretty bloody thick. You'd think this generic football game cured AIDS. It reads more like an article from Match magazine than a video game review, as it goes through a play-by-play of a fictitious match between Algeria and Brazil. If you were into football, this might have got you sort of in match of the day type excitement. For dorks like myself in 1991, I could not give a boglin's fart over this. The rest of the propaganda simply describes the features of the game and extols its unique selling points as subtly as a brick through the anus. The game is itself, football, I don't know. I've only ever played 2 football games in my life, World Cup on the Game Boy and International Superstar Soccer on the N64, which is so good you forget it's actually a football game. In tournament mode, you can choose an American soccer team and work your way up to the top. In World Cup, you can choose a national team and work your way to the top. There are teams that no longer exist. USSR and West Germany are playable teams. And when you're bored of that, as twice mentioned in this article, you can practice your shooting. It's a fairly plain looking game. The isometric view is interesting, I suppose. It's pretty frantic and really hard to score a goal. When you do manage to get one past goalie, you are treated to a little animation. Meh, yeah, it's footy. The music's alright. Next page has a review of the intriguing Kabuki Quantum Fighter, a side-scrolling platform action game from HAL and Human Entertainment. A game that blends Tron, Ninja Gaiden, and traditional Japanese theatre? The premise of the game is that something is infecting Earth's defense computers with a strange virus, and for some reason an American military guy gets digitized and inserted into the computer's code. The digitization process turns him into a kabuki actor from 18th century Japan in an Assassin's Creed genetic memory twist. This is a really pleasing page. The jarring colour scheme demands attention, for me at least. The art that is used as a watermark is a recreation of the game's box art. The top looks like a printed circuit board and the bottom half features Kabuki Man. The text refers to the main character as Kabuki Man, when the clue is in the title. He's Quantum Fighter. And his main weapon, those flowing orange locks. There is some proper Japanese weirdness in this game for sure. Your main weapon is Quantum Fighter's hair and chips that serve as projectiles or special weapons. Again, the keen of eye among you will have noticed that these screenshots are literal shots of a screen. You can even see some curvature of the CRT in these, both in the image and in the borders used by the publisher. These shots aren't too bad. I wonder if they used a generic household TV or if the freelancer was supplied with one of those fancy professional video monitor jobbies. This review is neatly divided into exposition and guide. The first 2 paragraphs setting up the context for the game's action, and the 3rd and 4th paragraphs give you an idea of what to expect in this
very worthwhile game.
Truly, the language used in this magazine is almost hypnotic in its strangeness. But Faceless Reviewer number 6 is right on the money with their comparison to Sunsoft's Batman. But Kabuki Quantum Fighter has more in common with this magazine's main feature, Ninja Gaiden, as the graphics and atmosphere in Kabuki have a lot in common with Ryu Hayabusa's NES debut. On the face of it, it's just another action platformer. Your character moves left to right, jumping between platforms, killing enemies to get energy to fuel the secondary weapons before arriving at a single screen boss. And look, it's called a Guardian here. See, I mentioned in the last issue that Guardian was the word for boss before we used boss. I wasn't going mental, it really happened. Let's bring it back, folks. Let's bring it back like a bunch of socially inept NES-era lingo hipsters. We'll form a troupe. We can have t-shirts. Your boy can also hang off the bottom of some platforms and can jump up or swing himself to another platform. I suppose the defining feature is the hair as weapon thing. He whips his hair back and forth in a manner of which Willow Smith can only dream. It's a fun game. Classic Nintendo hard but visually interesting with a disappointing lack of classical Japanese theatre. For the actually crowd out there, I am legally bound by internet law to refer to the Japanese version of this game, which is modified to tie in with a movie called Jippang. The movie also featured a kabuki-themed character, but that's where the similarities end. Holy cow, man. I just watched a scene from Jippang. It looks insane. Following on is a review for Isolated Warrior, a game I'd never heard of. According to Nameless Freelancer number 32, not much, besides a run-through of the first couple of stages. Isolated Warrior isn't even worthy of the limp praise that Kabuki received, which I suppose is a rating in itself. This page isn't as fun as the last, but it does feature some nice freehand art based on the box art. A lot of the featured text is extrapolated from the game's manual. It's the usual one-man army versus an invading horde. Peaceful planet Pan has been invaded, the good folk have been evacuated, which must have been one hell of a convoy, and the most bodacious Max Maverick is left to kill everything that remains and reclaim the planet in the name of the Panions watching from orbit. Nice of them to help. You'd think that at least a couple of them would offer a hand in the name of solidarity. I like the dot matrix printer paper feature on the side there. Max has a classified document surname, whatever that is, and he has a limited file classification. Now, if that ambiguous terminology doesn't spell badass, I don't know what does. It's an interesting game, presented in an isometric view. It plays a bit like a shooter, where destroyed enemies leave weapon power-ups that you can use to develop your focus or wide beams. Max Maverick walks up the screen, shooting and throwing bombs. He can also somersault and ride a hovercraft or motorbike thing. A nice touch not mentioned in this article is the use of cutscenes to tell Max's story. The game boots straight into an introduction sequence, and not the usual developer publisher credits and title screen. Fun fact, this game was developed by Kid, who also developed my beloved Low-G Man and shares largely the exact same plot. Alright, next up is a game I owned as a kiddie, The Battle of Olympus. Lord knows why I got this. I don't remember being particularly into Greek mythology. I probably pestered my parents for it, thinking it was a bit like Zelda 2. This is a bigger game, so it gets 2 whole pages, one of which contains a map of the town of Arcadia. It's more of a guide than a review, this one. We have some slightly ropey art dotted around the pages, but some varied screenshots that manage to generate a lot of interest in the different locations in the game, while the background is a blurry faux topological map. The text likens the game to Zelda 2, as did many other games magazines at the time. This article would have been pretty handy at the time, as I remember being a bit overwhelmed by this game. It's slightly non-linear, so you could go anywhere-ish and win the Greek god's favour in a semi-random order. Each location gets a brief description and some helpful info, almost forming a walkthrough guide to the game. This is probably the strongest aspect of Club Nintendo magazine. While they weren't particularly forthcoming with critique, they did present the reader with what they could expect and give them some useful advice along the way. Pages 10 and 11 cover Shadowgate, a menu-driven RPG originally published by Mindscape for Macs and PCs. This NES version was done by Kemco, and it's surprisingly alright. In lieu of an actual review from this magazine, I award this game the first ever, yeah, it's alright. It didn't make me want to burn my house down award. This is a proper old school RPG, and not much of a step up from the text adventures of old. Static screens, and GUI, copied and colorized from the Mac original. Once again, this review teaches nothing that isn't in the manual. The advanced strategy section contains some good advice though, which essentially equates to try every combination of action with every single object in your inventory. The point and click answer to everything. Also, think the same way as a programmer brought back some fierce flashbacks to when I played Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. Those games are great, but you literally have to think like the developer and issue any sort of logical deduction of your own. But I digress. I have to say, dying is very, very easy in this game. Without warning, your game can end with a screen depicting the Grim Reaper. There is a lot of trial and error needed to get through this. Fortunately, the NES version drops you off exactly where you were at the time of your unreasonable death. One critique I do have is the speed of the cursor. It's painfully slow. Converting a mouse to a D-pad takes a bit of fine tuning, and the speed should be dependent on how long you've been pressing the button. Also, having a button to flip between the screen, menu and inventory would be amazing. The B button is just sitting there doing nothing, as is select. Just tap select, flick to the action menu, make a selection with A, tap again to flick to the inventory or game screen, then perform the action with A. It could have been so simple. I wonder why it wasn't implemented. You can see some cracking curvature on the screenshots here. Believe it or not, those lines are all straight in the actual game. I'm beginning to really love seeing this. It's real pioneer spirit. How else could you get images from screen to page? We weren't quite ready for digitizers, and while some magazines and advertisements drew graphics by hand over screenshots, the amount happening on a NES screen would have made that a huge pain in the derriere. And next, a game that no one has been waiting for, a game that this very publication described as quite absorbing, and it brings the game on par with Poundland Kitchen Roll. Is it worthy of such tepid response? Could this 7-year-old Atari 8-bit classic hold its own against fellow NES action puzzle games like Solomon's Key, Adventures of Lolo, or Lode Runner? Does this game, which received a 2-page spread in Nintendo's primary propaganda device, earn its place alongside Goal, Battle of Olympus, and Shadowgate? Well, I'm here to tell you, friends, that yes, despite the valiant attempts by this reviewer to make the game look as mundane as possible, it's actually a belter of a game. Purge those unsightly screenshots from your eyes and feast them on this emulated footage. See how colourful it is, and look, there's an adorable Mario 3 style overworld map for you to make your way across. They're great for adding cohesion to a game. The overworld map is what separated a series of standalone levels into an epic quest, providing context, exposition, and a way to look back at what went before in a manner far more engaging than just a random level number. Why the reviewer felt inclined to hide this from the reader is anyone's guess. Maybe it was mandated from above to make the upcoming Mario 3 seem much more revolutionary. Oof, that first sentence is interesting. Become the Manic Miner. Maybe this reviewer isn't completely clueless. Or they accidentally stumbled upon a nice piece of alliteration without knowing anything about Jet Set Willy, Manic Miner 2, or Miner 2049er, which also appeared on the Atari 8-bits. Now, the next sequence squirts all that goodwill out of its arse by saying there are 6 levels. I'll come to that later. If you played Repton on the BBC Micro as a kid, you'll know how this game works. Dash through the stages collecting gems and dodging falling rocks and enemies. Dig your way strategically through the stages, getting the required number of gems before the exit appears. There are 24 levels spread across 6 worlds, but not only that, once you complete those 6 worlds, Quest 2 begins, which is the same game but with harsher requirements to clear a level. Then there's Quest 3, which is harder. And then there's Quest 4, which is even harder still, giving this gem of a game some longevity. It truly is a diamond in the rough, and it totally rocks. It's a stone cold classic, and so on and so forth. Got to give them credit for their bold attempt to stick multiple photos of screens together to make a map of the first few levels. Featured game of the mag, it's Tecmo's conversion of arcade stonker Shadow Warriors. Now, I never had a subscription to Club Nintendo, but a friend of my brother did. I vividly remember reading this page and being utterly blown away by the screenshot of a cutscene. I couldn't fathom how they'd managed to make the NES look so good. It was like watching a movie. This article is very strange though. The author cannot decide on the protagonist's name. In one sentence, he's Ryu Hayabusa, no, or Ryu Hayabusa, which is correct. Some effort has gone into this piece. The letter in the top right is paraphrased from the game's opening cinematic, and the roll of film effect demonstrating the action in the first 2 stages is a nice touch. Games are movies now, kids. See? It's like being at the cinema. It's 1991 and the line between Hollywood and your living room has been inexorably blurred. It can't possibly get any better than this. The rest of the review is a run-through of the power-ups and some of Ryu's skills before ending with a dramatic retelling of what goes on in stages 1 and 2. Knockout stuff. And yet there is no information that couldn't have been got from the manual or the back of the box. No mention that it's an arcade conversion of sorts. No mention of the great cinematics that occur throughout the game, nothing of the challenging bosses and the shocking ramp up in difficulty. It's a genuinely good game and a paradigm of what we now call Nintendo hard. The only thing that sold me on this game was that one screenshot. I'd love to know if anyone ever, in the history of all humankind, ever bought a game on the strength of what they'd read in a Club Nintendo. Please, please, please leave a comment below and I'll include it in future episodes of Back to the Newsies. Okay then, from page 16 we're going Game Boy crazy in a Game Boy special with a picture of what looks like Mario launching a non-existent fireball and manning a sub from hit Game Boy launch title Super Mario Land, a game that got 94% in GB action, remember? Of course, this being Club Nintendo, it gets an impressive 11 out of 10 by default. The article promises to feature 19 different games. Well, kinda. Most of those features are in single sentences describing the fact that at some point they will appear on the Game Boy. The 19 featured games are Super RC Pro-Am with the mention of the 4-player ability using the adapter, Princess Blobette, aka The Rescue of Princess Blobette, a sequel to NES classic A Boy and His Blob. Gremlins 2, a port of the NES game, no, not this time chums, it's a side-on platformer. Castlevania's Simon Belmont makes his monochrome debut in Castlevania The Adventure. Kung Fu Masters Thomas is on a kicking quest to rescue his bird from nefarious ne'er-do-wells. Boxall, a thrilling puzzle game that sees you slide boxes around a warehouse to their correct position. Dino Blaster is Bomberman, all the classic Bomberman action with none of the name. Bomberman would come later to the Game Boy under the name Bomberman GB, which is a whole mess I cannot be asked to get into right now. Port of reviewed Boulder Dash is also on its way to the Grey-Green Wonder. Samurai Adventure, I have no idea what this is. This might be the port of Samurai Showdown to the Game Boy, or it was another game that was cancelled late in development. Paperboy! The 1984 classic makes its way to the Game Boy. At last! Play it on the move. Why not take it with you on your paper round? Stuff it in your bag alongside the mirrors and daily sports and have a quick play under the harsh orange streetlights that exclusively illuminated England in the 1990s. Seriously, all of my childhood memories that take place at night are orange. It's like they're being viewed through Lucasade. So, that's a list of 10 games and no extra information. What's the point? Ooh, Boxall. That sounds fun. I'll have to add that to my Christmas list based on the syllables that form the word alone. Do you want screens? Nah, man. The sounds that the words make as they leave your body should be more than enough to get you camping outside Dixon's in your Super Ted Jim Jams. Up next is an exploit on level 2-3 of Super Mario Land that lets you collect 1-ups, then kill yourself in the game. Don't actually kill yourself. It's not that bad a game. Here are the proper features. Multiplayer madness in F1 with the bundle 4-player adapter. It's one of the best you can buy, apparently. It's an alright game, I suppose. Pretty bare bones and no frills. I bought it in a second-hand shop in Japan, alongside a Game Boy Pocket. Motocross Maniacs is a game I am very familiar with, having played the sequel, Motocross Maniacs 2, on the Game Boy Color, where the only difference is the use of colour and having other racers on track to challenge you. It's featured in my The 100 series of videos, where I talk about 100 games from my collection that I really like. Have a look, details below. Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles Fall of the Foot Clan is another banging game, but I can't help but think that giving F1 2 screens and all the other games none is a bit of a waste, especially when you consider how good Turtles looks. The sprites are large and detailed, the bosses are straight from the cartoon series, it's just more visually interesting. This here says it has
decent graphics and stunning sound.
That's kind of accurate. Hang on a minute, just look at those screenshots, they're blooming glorious. What were they doing differently to GB Action magazine? Well, thinking back to my childhood, there were Game Boy kiosks in shops that featured a Game Boy and a monitor, so people who weren't directly using the Game Boy could see what was going on. I imagine that this tech was used to allow the Club Nintendo team to capture these lovely bright images. I remember playing Spider-Man on such a machine when I was a kiddie. I thought it was cool. Our next 3 games are Fairly Pooh Batman, based on the 1989 movie. Inexplicably, Batman carries a gun in this one. Complete madness. This time, the feature claims that this game has
amazing digitized graphics and decent sound.
The poor bloke must be running out of mild approval. Unless he means decent as in decent. I remember that being a thing in the 90s. Hey man, check out my Fido Dido shirt. Aw mate, that is totally decent. Robocop is one of those rarest of things, a decent movie tie-in that came from Ocean Software. It was ported to literally every system available on Earth at the time. They all play pretty much the same and are fairly accurate to the plot of the film. The Spectrum version sold nutty amounts. A port of arcade classic R-Type as featured in my previous episode, but what is very, very, very interesting is that they too refer to the end of level boss in stage 1 as the Gladiator, which is completely wrong. So maybe I or IRM are wrong, but wait, no. Turns out we're all kinda right. Kinda. According to the R-Type wiki, Dobkeratops was sometimes referred to as the Gladiator. That is an absurdly silly name. Dobkeratops is far better. Let's have no more talk about it. Hang on a minute. That's only 16 games. 10 in the opening text, and 3 on each of the next 2 pages. Oh. F. S. I'm missing a page from my mag, and it's too late to leave negative feedback on eBay. Craps. As per the self-inflicted rules of this web series, I only cover mags that haven't already been scanned and uploaded, so there are no alternatives for me to check against. Or is there? Some saint over on archive.org has uploaded a scan of this very magazine. Dun dun dun! It's all in foreign. But it looks like we're missing the skinny on Hyper Load Runner, DuckTales, and the superb Chase HQ. If there are any Italian speakers in the audience, give me the TLDR and I'll put it in the description. The second page I'm missing is a series of reader profiles. It looks like school photo day was a success for these Nintendo maniacs, except for Bentriz Del Caso, who looks like her photo was taken downtown after trying to shoplift Kinder Eggs. There's an old lady! Imagine that! An old lady playing video games! Old people are confused by new things. Chortle. Games Master got a bit of mileage out of this sort of thing in Season 2, when Auntie Marisha took part in challenges, but there was also a feature on gaming grannies running amok in a London arcade. Page 17 is the online leaderboard of 1991 Club Nintendo's Scores of Fun, where kiddies took Polaroids of their TV and sent them in. Bloody kids today with their instantaneous global leaderboards. Imagine the joy of working hard at a game, taking a photo, having it developed over the course of a week because it was cheaper than getting it done same day, and money doesn't bloody grow on trees, finding a spare envelope kicking around, buying a stamp from the nice lady at the post office and a 10p mix of fruit salads and white chocolate and mice while you were there, popping it in the mail, then waiting for up to 2 months to see your name printed in the hallowed pages of Club Nintendo, only to be beaten by Johnny Foreigner, who probably cheated anyway. There's a top 10, based on gut instinct and first-party bias, or kiddies voting by mail, wink wink. In the cold, cynical light of the early 2020s, one could think this might be used to push games that weren't all that. Super Mario Bros. 2 is the second worst game on that list. Sorry, Gauntlet 2. Tips and tricks! Quirky platformer Rad Gravity gets 2 full pages of quality advice. I don't want to be that guy, but that first sentence suggests I'm using my computer as some sort of steed chasing down a couple of ruffians. I get what they were trying to do with the polka dot background thing. It's supposed to be the universe, right? And those are planets coloured in earth tones, but it doesn't quite work, and the colours sometimes clash with the text. I think these pages would have sold games too. They give a decent amount of info on what goes on in the game, and the screens in context make it look more interesting than the random ones we've seen posted so far. Rad Gravity was one of those games that I was aware of back in the day. I'd seen it in the shops, and the sci-fi setting and the chunky player sprite did intrigue me, just not enough to pester my parents to buy me the game. I don't think any of my NES-owning friends had it either. Considering it's called Rad Gravity, the tampering with gravity only comes in on the last stage where you play upside down. You'd think they'd make more of the gimmick, like the excellent Metal Storm. The manual for this game is fantastic. The first half is a comic to get you up to speed with Rad and his universe. The art has a real 50s pulp sci-fi thing going on, and it's great. Steve Englehart, writer for Marvel, DC, and more, wrote the script, and the art was by Frank Sirocco, who, turns out, did the artwork for a comic that came with Yar's Revenge on the Atari 2600. Again, these days, we consider ourselves lucky to even get a manual with our games, much less accompanying comics, and stickers or badges. Sure, some indie games might throw in a keyring or art book as a little treat, but that's your lot. And that's not a grumble. I truly appreciate those indies and smaller studios that actually care about their games and recreating the experience of tearing the cellophane off a game, thumbing through an illustrated manual, marveling at the trading card or vinyl sticker, badge, keyring, temporary tattoo. I have so many memories of popping on a bus into town with my mum, picking up a new game and poring over the manual and box art on the bus ride home, my mitten-enclosed hands fumbling to turn the pages, my mother wiping snot off my face with a spit-moistened hanky. I was 35 years old and life was good. Next is something I definitely needed. I think I got this game from my auntie Liz or grandparents for Christmas one year. It's an ace example of making a movie tie-in game. There are cinematics that probably exceed Ninja Gaiden's. All the enemies are here, and even though he died at the beginning of the movie, not Mr. Miyagi has returned from the grave to fleece Gizmo on the price of health and weapon upgrades. Hang on, they don't even tell you how to do the main boss. This is either down to the writer not getting that far, or not being able to beat him, or it was Friday afternoon before deadline and they couldn't be asked to go beyond their word quota. Tucked in the bottom are corrections for previously published reviews for Burai Fighter and isometric head scratcher Solstice. That second tip is incomprehensible. Readers' tips and tricks. You reckon any of these are real? Also note that the hotline is mentioned, again with no indication of call length or cost. It was thanks to little Timmy running up bills into the hundreds that mandated all adverts like this be published with the call length and the cost per minute. The first tip is pretty interesting though. I wonder how they found that out. Seems that the fifth letter in the password dictates the number of lives. I wonder if they spent an afternoon going through all permutations to see if there was a magic letter that triggered 4 lives or the unimaginable wealth of 5 whole lives. The third tip or trick is just a cheat made possible by the excellent NES Advantage or Max, both phenomenal controllers from Nintendo. Look at that picture of Zelda, man alive, who drew that? Get your blank postcards and crayons out, we're going to send our tips to Nando's/Club Nintendo in Fareham. I have a tip, if you are losing at Call of Duty 18 or whatever, simply steal your mum's credit card and buy all the best guns or aimbots, I don't know, lols. Sneak peek of Mario 3, holy hot farts. This is the last big thing to happen to the NES before the SNES came out. I mean, there's a very good chance that Mario 3 was already out in the UK when this publication went out, so there might be some head scratching from the readership. That said, this magazine cum software catalogue would also give mum and dad an idea of what to get little Tim Tim from Santi. So laying the groundwork in this late summer issue ready for the hard sell the following Christmas issue is prudent. Those sneaky buzzards, they never miss a trick. They make mention of the overworld map, adding some validity to the conspiracy theory I presented in the Boulder Dash review. While everything else read like it was written after a dose of Xanax, this is gushing with enthusiasm. I mean, there was probably no need. The game was hyped to the teats with adverts on TV and magazines. There was a whole Hollywood movie starring cult favourite Christian Slater and the kid from that TV show, which existed solely to advertise Mario 3. It was called The Wizard, and it's great, if only for the frenzied Parkinson-style gameplay acting from Beau Bridges. If you think this magazine is a cynical propaganda device for Nintendo, check out The Wizard. It's outrageous. To round out the magazine, there are 9 sneak peeks of some incredible games. Low G-Man! It's my mission in life to bring this gem to the world. Again, our writer relies on the limpest of adjectives to get you hyped for its release. At the time, it wasn't all that well reviewed, but I've always loved this game. The soundtrack is awesome. There's a risk-reward mechanic in the combat. You have a freeze ray and a harpoon. Freeze an enemy, harpoon it to death, possibly get a prize. But if you don't freeze the enemy and go straight for the kill, the rewards are always better. Yes, the scrolling is jerky enough to induce a seizure. Yes, the sprites have a staggering 2 frames of animation each, but it's still a gem of a game. Look out for more details in the next issue. Top Gun 2 isn't a gem of a game. It's a flight sim on a NES. Man alive, that's a bold choice. Look out for more details next issue. Nah, it's not that bad. It's better than that stealth fighter game I borrowed from a mate as a kid. That was rough as balls. Third up is the needlessly difficult Bart vs. the Space Mutants, a platform-based collect 'em up based on the Simpsons license. The text here is adorable. We have the whitest, nerdiest kid in school trying to write like Bart Simpson, where the sole requirement is ending every third sentence with man. I can always get to level 5, but I can never finish this game. But I won't have a cow, man. That's a thing he said. WWF WrestleMania is a game I have not played, but being interesting at the time, I would have been aware of it. The golden age of gaming is roughly the same era as the golden age of wrestling. Both hit their peak in the 80s. Freaky! Makes sense that the WWF would want in on that sweet, sweet Nintendo action. Look for more details in the next issue. Ski or Die is another game that featured on the greatest TV video games challenge show ever, Games Master. Pat Sharp, wearing a staggering sweater and mortifying hair, and fellow DJ Mick Brown took part in a Ski or Die based challenge. That was in episode 6 of season 1, Games Master fans. Ski or Die was not one of those games that seemed to be everywhere. There was a version for the NES, Commodore 64, Amiga, and DOS PCs. It's a compendium of 5 winter sports themed minigames. Roller Games is... what the hell is Roller Games? Never heard of it. Hang on. US television series, half-term, to play Super Roller Dime. None the wiser. Alright, let's play! Oh dear lord, this is... interesting? Look out for more details in the next issue! Defender of the Crown. On the NES. That's an Amiga game, right? Ported to the NES. An Amiga game famous for its visuals with the pixel art, animations, cutscenes, asset management, strategy. On the NES. Well, there was a C64 version too, so I guess it can't look any worse than that. Oh lord, this is brutal. I mean, you'd have to be seriously into Middle Ages Britain to get anything out of this. Basically, wail on a fellow armour-wearing knight with a sword, mace and lance, nick their land, and become God King of England or something. I don't know, that's not my cup of tea. Kickle Cubicle is an arcade port of the game of the same name. Freeze enemies and turn them into bridges to collect stuff, or build blocks to channel enemies and turn them into bridges to collect stuff. Get advice from vegetables. It's a Japanese arcade puzzler. Of course it is! It's surprisingly fun. Having to corral the enemies into the right spot to fill gaps in the ice leads to some pretty frantic action. Yeah, boy, another gem from the NES. Power Blade. Guide totally not Arnold Schwarzenegger through a future city, putting an end to a nefarious plot by nondescript aliens who have shut down the computer that runs everything, or something, I don't know. Grab a boomerang and hoss it at some robots. Become Robocop in this no way IP borrowing action platformer from Natsume. Fun fact, this game looks suspiciously like Shatterhand, another game by Natsume. Look for more details in the next issue. Hang on a bloody minute. Half of these are essentially adverts for next month's reviews. That's outrageous. Half the writing work has been done the issue before. I was skeptical at first, but this magazine's actually a little bit sleazy. Of a 32-page magazine, these 3 pages and the page promoting upcoming Game Boy games are just here to lay the groundwork for the next issue. Bloody hell. There are gaming mags of this era with more information on the contents page than the entirety of this magazine. Surely there has to be something redeeming about this magazine. Something that shows it has a heart, and it's not just here to shovel Nintendo down the throats of the readers. Oh look! Rounding off the magazine is a letters page. Let's keep our fingers crossed, kids. Well, the first totally real letter is from a geriatric gamer, which, thankfully, gives the editor a chance to remind readers that Nintendo is for everyone consume. Next question is about memory, something that to 99.99999% of game enthusiasts would have little understanding of. The editor assumes the reader is asking about storage memory and not RAM memory. The NES does have 2 huge kilobytes of RAM and some extra memory for sprites and palettes. The gamepads could contain RAM to boost the performance of the NES, as was the case with the mentioned Super Mario 3. Oh man, can you imagine how exciting it would have been to read in 1991 that a Mario Brothers movie was on the way? It was beyond incredible. Such hype, so Bowser. Wow. Shame it was irredeemably shite. It is, we all know it, it's indefensibly spaff. Stop pretending to like it. Hey, here's another review for a Nintendo product from Gareth Lloyd of Cardiff. Hang on. Rearrange the letters in Gareth Lloyd and you get Gather Dolly. Dolly is like a princess. Gather princess. Get the princess. And what does Mario do in every single game? I've cracked it. I've Batmaned the shit out of that one. Right, hand me the Zodiac Killer's coded letters. I'll crack those buggers wide open. Oh, it's been done. Balls. So, apparently Probotector is pretty good. That's true. Look at the response though. These lazy bastards are trying to get the readers to do their job for them. Christ alive and lepers, this is so shady. FFS, the last letter is a review for the NES itself. Hang on. Alex Osman Brims. Rearrange the letters and you get everything you believe is a lie. I feel like I'm going to cry. They never loved you. You were cattle to them. Keep scarfing down Nintendo content, you fatted calf. Open your gaping maw a little wider. We have more products to cram in there. No. You're not done yet. There's another Mario game to buy. When you're done with that, there's a Super Nintendo coming out next Easter. You'll need that. Without that, you're a sado and everyone will hate you. There's another Mario coming to that too. It has more colours. It has all the colours. You know that NES Zapper? Throw that shit in the bin. There's a frigging bazooka on a Super Nintendo. And shit spins and rotates on the SNES. You need that as well. Can the Mega Drive spin shit around? Has it got a load of colours? Or a bazooka? It has. Well, Sonic is a little queef. You want to be manly like Mario. That Game Boy, see that? Seen a Game Gear or a Lynx lately? No, you won't. We run those bitches out of town using only 4 colours. We are Nintendo. We were here before you. We'll be here long after your sun has burnt out and all of mankind is dead. And there'll be another fucking Mario game on the way. In a move that will shock no one, Nintendo has teamed up with similarly shady corporate entity McDonald's. To be fair to McDonald's, as evil as they were then, they knew how to get kids in to eat that delicious slop. McDonald's toys were the balls. Look at these. Mario has one of those push down and pop up things. Perfect for having an eye out. Man, I miss dangerous toys. In an attempt at heartwarming do-gooder news, a man decorated his taxi with Nintendo imagery to raise charity for underprivileged kids or something. That's nice, isn't it? These days, the Big N would sue the living balls off you for using any of their iconography without their express consent. Because they are meanies. Mario would like to issue an apology. Apparently, Princess Peach, who, as her gender demands, is in charge of administration, when she's not pumping out babies or lovingly preparing a nutritious and balanced meal for the menfolk, fell behind. Don't buy foreign product. It might run faster and look better. True story, it usually did. Closing out the magazine, we have a lovely full-page pin-up or advert for Super Mario Bros. 3. It's lovely. So, that was issue 5 of volume 3 of Club Nintendo magazine, and what a journey that was! What have we learnt? Well, we've learnt that Nintendo knew what they were doing when it came to advertising. We've learnt that the term review is wide-reaching and vague at best. Not all games are worth screenshots. Hell, some games aren't even worth a synopsis. We've learned that you can get 2 issues out of a game, neither of which contain any opinion or excitement. And we've learned that this is a pretty inventive way to deliver your propaganda. This is Club Nintendo. The name explicitly states belonging, as would any group, team or cult. This is continued inside with the direct address, imperatives and modal verbs to communicate directly to the reader. I mean, I must say, I was really looking forward to making an episode about this magazine, but it's been a bit of an eye-opener. As kids, we would have had no idea the psychological warfare that was going on each page. We were just there for the screens and the bright colours. Would something like this even exist today? Or has the relentless stream of social media rendered such a device useless? Nintendo already has access to you directly through Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. The hard sell is now sent straight to your eyeballs 24/7 through your smartphone. It makes the idea of a magazine used to shill seem quaint and almost wistful. At least once you'd read it, you had a good 60 days until the next dose. Today's target audience does not stand a chance. Now I don't know how to feel. Club Nintendo seems a bit skeevy and evil, but in a modern context, I'm sure parents the world over would freaking love their kids to be advertised to once every 2 months instead of every waking second. I learned to stop worrying and love Club Nintendo. Alright, that'll just about do us for this issue. How the hell has a magazine half the size of GB Action ended up with a script of similar length? Actually, this script was far too long. I cut some bits out. If you want to read what ended up on the cutting room floor, I have included it in the data blast. Once again, mash space or K to freeze frame the data blast and get all the goodies. And a sneak peek at next issue of Back to the Newsies. Thanks for watching, and I need a closing line for this series. Bye!